Oh, you see, somebody knows what's going on. We have an order of speakers, but of course, needless to say, we don't always follow that, but that's okay. We have, ladies and gentlemen, give a big welcome, if you would please, to the Governor of the Training Unit of Mountjoy Prison, and that is David Mulligan. And they have their own shed, of course, and he wants to say a few words to you. Thank you very much indeed.
Good morning, everybody. Pity the poor fool that has to follow Michael Harding, because that was fabulous. I do have a PowerPoint presentation, but it's not dead by PowerPoint, I promise you. It's just photographs to help me explain the journey of our men's shed. I should also point out, I believe that the guys back at Mountjoy in the men's shed are tuning in, so I should say a very big hello to them as well. Right, so, thanks. So what is a prison governor from Mountjoy doing, talking to men's shed? Well, obviously we have a men's shed, I'm delighted to say, on the complex. Just to explain Mountjoy complex, there's probably about 1,100 prisoners on that complex this morning, because it's actually made up of several different prisons. You have the old Victorian prison itself, and another one just beside it called the Progression Unit. At the very front, if you ever are in that part of Dublin, there's a red brick building. That's the Doka Centre, it's a female prison. There's also a medical unit that was built in the 1980s as a response to the HIV crisis. And then tucked away at the very back is the training unit. It's a standalone prison by itself, and it was built in 1970. It's a bit of a misnomer now because it was originally built to carry out training for younger guys who would be about to be released. A lot of them would go outside, do their training outside, come back and stay overnight. But there was a huge, big metal workshop there, all sorts of welding and training going on in there. However, it was closed around about 2015, mothballed. And then around about 2019, there was a realization within the organization that we were getting a very aging population of prisoners. And so we looked at what could we do for those prisoners who weren't best suited to be just in the big prisons with much younger prisoners who may be involved in crime, drug seeking and stuff like that. So the decision was made to reopen the training unit for men aged 55 and older. However, COVID happened and everything got shelved for another couple of years. So what is the training unit? Well, if we're working, and we are, we reopened it in 2022. I was the governor. We have 96 inmates in it, and they're all aged over 55. I think the eldest is up into his mid-80s. Probably the average age is 60, 65, somewhere between that. So I didn't do it by myself. I have about 50 staff. The thing about the staff is they were probably like the rest of us, grizzled, had been 20-odd years dealing with all sorts of prisoners and all sorts of problems you can imagine in a prison. So to get them to come into the training unit and change their mindset slightly to deal with the older cohort prisoner was a big ask, but my God, they took it on brilliantly. And I had two wonderful assistants. One a chief nurse officer called Orla Finn, who's not here, and she looked after the physical health of the men. She has a team of nurses, and just from what we were talking about earlier about men talking and maybe not taking their health as seriously as we should, she ran a screening program recently and identified 8 prisoners who are asymptomatic who had cancer, and they're all receiving treatment now and making really good progress. So maybe it's just for all of us to realise maybe we should go and get checked out and don't be hiding things. But the other person is a chief officer called Brian Cahill. Brian's here with me, and we'll be looking forward to speaking to you all afterwards, because as well as the physical health, the mental health was huge for how we were going to try and look after the guys. And I guess that's where the men's shed came in. For those of you that don't know Brian, that's him there. And he's actually in the men's shed there. That's one of the items one of our guys makes. Probably wasn't expecting to see his face up there in 6 foot. I also want to mention Greg O'Callaghan. He actually is in charge of the men's shed back there, and he put in some loads of volunteer work times when he didn't have to be there, just to make sure it kept running. But I'll talk a bit more about that in a while. So how did we get involved in the men's shed? Well, Brian contacted Rebecca McLaughlin and asked her, would you come in for a cup of coffee to speak to myself and him, just to see if we could actually run a men's shed in a prison. And anyone who doesn't know what Rebecca looks like, that's pretty much her. Because she's been nothing but super for us, really enthusiastic. And just the support she's given us has been pretty amazing. I think Brian will agree with that. So what did we have? Well, like I mentioned, the big metal shop that we had, that's actually it. Probably around the time we got Rebecca to come in, we were tidying it up. Bear in mind, the building had been mothballed for about 5 years at that stage. It looked like a scene of one of those movies where humans have left the planet, and foliage and animals had all moved in. There was no lines walking across the yard, but there was certainly pigeons and seagulls nesting everywhere. So the first thing we did was clean it up. But we brought Rebecca in. Some of the lads were already upcycling old furniture, but we wanted to do other activities, and we wanted advice as to what we could do. And of course, when she saw this big shed, she was blown away by that and says, "Oh, you can do what you want in here, it's great." So we knew we were on the right track. So just to give you an idea, that's a photograph of it now. Now there's no one in it, as you can see. I'm not really allowed to show photographs of the guys, but trust me, on any given day, it's a hive of activity. Those benches along the back there are individual where lads will sit down, do things like wood burning. We've model making. I know Ken is probably there at the moment, finishing off a Messerschmitt 109 or something in the corner. We also upcycle a lot of our pallets, and really if it's broken and we have it in the train unit, we will turn it into something else. It's one of the things we're huge on in there. So we asked the guys what they wanted to do. So a lot of the activities they've suggested themselves. One of the things they do is they restore our old benches around the place. They paint them to make the place look better. That's a wonderful photograph, the two of us. That was actually what I did to one of the papers. And you can see some of the guys in the background working on other things. Bikes. One of the huge things that we do. We're involved in a good bike project. That's Paul McQuaid on Usher's Quay in Dublin. He's been on the Late Late Show with this. Paul gets bikes donated to him, old bikes, and he cleans them, repairs them, and then donates them to the Irish Red Cross, and they go to refugees. So we were lucky enough to get put in touch with Paul, and Paul came in himself, and he still does come in regularly. He trains our guys up in bike maintenance, which is something they'd actually asked us, could they do? It was perfect timing. And I think that's something from the Irish Times. The 60th bike that we made was the 2000 bike he was donating, and it was gone to a 15-year-old Ukrainian girl living out in the middle of the country somewhere so she could get to school. So you can imagine the sense of satisfaction that our shedders are getting, not just from the work they're doing, restoring the bikes. They polish the chrome, they change the tires, the brakes, you name it, and clean them up. They look like things that could go under a Christmas tree by the time they're finished with them. They really do. But then to know that they're then going out to this really good cause is just terrific. And going back to what we said about mental health, when we did open, we wanted our men to feel less isolated because they were coming from big prisons where an older guy maybe wasn't fitting in too well. So to be able to bring them into an area where they could sit down, do something meaningful, no targets, no nothing like that. Trust me, they drink plenty of tea and coffee. But it was brilliant for their mental health. Stops the social isolation, which can happen in prisons, certainly with the older prisoner. So that's been hugely successful for us. Now that's just an old yard that we had. It's actually a football pitch. That was a five-a-side football pitch that was into disrepair. So the other part of the men's shed that we have is a polytunnel. In fact, we've 2 of them. There was one old battered polytunnel there when we arrived, and many of the guys expressed an interest in growing flowers and plants and stuff like that. So we set them up, the polytunnel, and it was hugely successful. That's the original polytunnel. I actually had to get the guys to leave to take the photograph, and trust me, everyone that picked up their cup of coffee and walked past me. It's a little hive of activity as well. On any given day, there could be 10 or 15 lads working in the 2 polytunnels on top of the 20 odd that would be working in the man's shed. There's only 96 in the training unit, so roughly 50% of people are working. I don't like using the word work, but they certainly are in the men's shed working away. That's the second polytunnel behind that. You can see the fruit of some of their labours there, some of the plants that they've managed to grow. And a few weeks ago, you'd have seen nothing but hanging baskets in those polytunnels. This time of year isn't great now, but I can't get over the work that they do. That is that shed. Sorry, that's that yard I showed you a couple of minutes ago. That's what they've transformed it into. Now, the picture on the wall is a wrapping. It's the Phoenix Park. But all the plants and all the planters, everything there has come from our man's shed. And it's a wonderful place for them to sit and relax. It's right in the middle of Mountjoy complex in Frisborough. And when you sit down on it, certainly on a warm day, it can feel like you're in a park somewhere. It's really great, again, for the mental health of the men. And nothing is wasted. The green thing on the left is actually part of the fence that we cut down, and it's been used now for planting flowers. We're growing flowers up around the original fence, so it'll be almost like an enclosed garden. What else have we got? Ah, yes, the bench. You saw the bench we were standing in front of earlier. Well, we were put in touch, Rebecca put us in touch with Clem Fallon from the Irish Cancer Society, and they were launching daffodil benches. And old benches are being refurbed, painted in daffodil colours, and are going out into various parks and areas. And I don't know if you can see right in the middle there is a plaque, there's a QR code. The QR code, if you scan it with your phone, will give you all sorts of information on cancer services and also how you can donate to the Irish Cancer Society. Men's Shed Ireland is also one of the emblems on that. So it's, again, it highlights the work being done by the Men's Shed. And yet again, it's something our men are doing that really gives them a sense of giving something back to the communities. Something Men's Shed has given us that we just couldn't get elsewhere. So I can't speak highly of enough of how Men's Shed has been able to transform what we do in the prison for the men, to give them a sense of community and, again, giving something back, let alone going back to be able to talk, sit around, drink coffee. It's just been a huge success for us. I want to show you the garden outside. That was overgrown. That was, oh, sorry, no, before I get there, another thing we do is we collect our rainwater. We're big into upcycling and recycling. So we collect our rainwater, so all the plants around the grounds, we water ourselves with rainwater. I know Brian is huge. He's looking at doing more of them, and we might be able to flush all the toilets with our own rainwater. We have a biodigester, so all the waste food goes into that, and it turns it into fertiliser. We fertilise all our own stuff. I think Brian's even looking at getting solar panels at some stage and trying to really transform the unit into a very green building, which is fabulous. When we're showing you pictures of Australia, well, it's kind of it comes around a circle, because I believe Men's Shed started in Australia, but about 2 months ago, we had a visit from 2 nurse officers from the Australian prison service, the penal system over there. And we showed them around, showed them what we were doing, showed them the Men's Shed, and they were blown away by it. They said they'd never seen anything like it in a prison anywhere, and couldn't get over the community ethos that we had in the place. And all I could think of, yeah, that's Men's Shed for you. That's what we've managed to transform into a small little prison on the complex. I had to leave the train unit a few weeks ago. They promoted me, which was nice of them. And people say to me now, you've moved on to bigger and better things. Well, I stop them and say, no, definitely a bigger thing, but not better, because I don't think there's anything better in the prison system at the moment than the training unit. And a lot of that is down to the ethos that we have there that comes directly from the Men's Shed. So all I can say now is thank you for the invitation. Thanks for listening to me, and more important, thanks. Keep going, doing what you're doing, because if you can inspire prisoners in a prison, you can basically do anything. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. David Mulligan, thank you very much, David. Now we're going to